So again, we were hearing about that the increases or even the existing fees are too high, whether that be the fees for the fees that we're charging, or the fees in comparison with, we got a lot of comments that talked about increases in what it costs to go to law school, increased bar preparation fees, the increases in groceries and rent due to the current state of the economy, and that on top of that, people couldn't afford these additional increases and thought that they were unwarranted and unfair. And one of the other items that I wanted to point out in particular were those comments that talked about the fee increases being inconsistent or antithetical to our goal of increasing diversity in the profession, and that the increases would have a disproportionate effect on those who were socioeconomically disadvantaged, would result in less diversity in the profession because more diverse individuals would not be able to afford these increases and would, in fact, as a result, not be able to go to law school, not be able to sit for the bar exam, and would have that detrimental effect, antithetical to our strategic plan goals. So that's where we are on the proposal on the fees. I think maybe before we get into the policy for revision or talking about cost reduction measures, this would be a good time to take your questions and then proceed from there.
All right, trustees, any questions? Yes, Trustee Buenaventura.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me ask you about the $2 million that we have in revenue. If we were not going to use it to supplement or reduce the fee, where else would that money go, the $2 million?
So what we are looking at now is we're projecting, we're looking at having $6.2 million in reserves. Our 17% minimum floor of reserves would be $4.4 million. So you're talking about having a little bit over that floor. And there's a lot of activity going on right now in the Office of Admissions. We have pending before the Supreme Court a proposal from the Blue Ribbon Commission to develop a brand new California-specific bar exam. Exam development is not a cheap proposal. And so being able to have the reserves and have a little bit more in the reserves will greatly assist us in being able to conduct the development and the administration of a new bar exam.
I see. And then I'm assuming that in using your metrics of, your theory is when you broke down in terms of the law schools, the bigger the law schools, maybe you're thinking the more that they can pay. But I'm not familiar with, are there law schools with bigger treasury even though they have smaller number of students?
So I did not look at the individual finances of the law schools. Following sort of their comments that they would be passing these fees along to the law schools, the fees along to the law students, I apologize. The tiers are based on the number of law students. So the larger the law school, the more students you have to pass it on to. Therefore, it would be, they would be able to handle the higher fee. And in fact, it would be for most of them lesser, it would cost each individual law student less than the law students at the smaller schools that have the overall lower price.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to add on the 2 million or 1.8 million that, as we discussed, I believe yesterday, there is a lot of variability on the admissions revenue side. So another use for it may be if the 2024 revenue projections actually fall short of what is currently budgeted because there's not as many test takers or for other reasons. So it's not just solely potentially to fund new initiatives. Although under that new initiative header, I would categorize the portfolio-based exam pathway that you discussed yesterday. Should the board send that forward and the Supreme Court authorize that, that's another area where we would need to make an investment. But in addition to new initiatives, it's just important for the board to understand there is a lot of variability in the revenue that comes into admissions.
And probably one other thing to add, as you all know, we have a multi-year MOU with our bargaining units, with our staff, that include cost of living adjustments. As I mentioned at the lead-in to this, the cost for all of the admissions operations, including the employee compensation, come from these admissions fees. So to the extent that we've got a cost of living adjustment scheduled for 2025, that would also have to come out of these fees. And so that's not something that's included in sort of these projections. So that's something that a way that some of that funding would have to be used as well.
Right. Seeing no other questions. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have a few more. Trustee Sewell.
Clearly, this is an issue area that has gotten an awful lot of attention, both in the public comments that we've received, as well as I know that we received a letter from at least one state senator relative to this issue. Clearly, a 995% increase is that's a lot to absorb in 1 year, and a lot to pass on to students. In my day job, one of the areas that's sort of a pillar of the work that my nonprofit does is around student loan debt, and my fear is that as a part of this, and I know that some of it is going to be necessary, but as a part of that, we're going to be asking students to take out a lot more in the way of student loan debt, and on the back end of that may be in some respects discouraging for certain students to go into legal aid or other sort of parts of the law where we really could use their assistance, their service, and their dedication. Because they may make choices that would allow them to sort of pay off their loan sooner, or however the decision-making process might work.
Is how it works. They, their revenue's coming from students. Guess what? If we raise their accreditation fees, that's where they have to go. And so there is something attractive to me about saying, gosh, $90 for each student feels a little bit more fair than, a range of 283 to 70 or 170 to 53, depending on size, with the penalties going to the smallest schools, okay, the biggest penalties. I agree with the suggestion that we put this back out to comment, because it also gives us as a board a little bit more time to sharpen our pencils and look at the two questions that were brought up, the two variables. One variable is that the admissions revenue is running higher than expected. And this is the old revenue, the old fees. So, do we actually, can we find a little room for some of these fees? The second point being that, Trustee Sewell brought up the, issue of the reserve, and we don't want to be perceived of funding our reserve when, the impact is so high on people. So, and these are, students before they're earning, okay? I feel much more sympathetic to students, than attorneys who are earning money in their profession. They're not doing that yet. So I feel more for students, to be honest. And so we have this reserve, and this 17% It's a guideline. We can call it a policy when we want to, but there are no consequences. So it's a guideline, and so we should think about that. And the third thing it gives us time to think about is there any scenario in which we could maybe have a two-tier raise where we have part of the raise one year and part of the raise the next year? There is tremendous sticker shock. I've read all the comments on this one, okay? Many, many comments. And there's a big sticker shock, particularly from students. I'm talking about all the admission fees, not just this particular one. And so I would be in support of returning to this agenda item in November, asking the staff to, give us a couple more scenarios to say, gosh, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that to at least dull a little bit of the pain. There will be pain no matter what, but can we dull a little bit of it? Thank you.
So just a timing issue. Happy to do all of that. So one of the reasons that we are here today at the September meeting with this, we're looking to increase the fees for 2024. For the February 2024 bar exam, if we're going to increase those fees, that would have to be done at this meeting. We open registration for the February bar exam on October 1. So if this, right, so if the board still wants to increase that fee for February 24, that part would need to be done now. For the other fees, coming back in November would not impact our ability to put them in place fully for 2024.
Thank you for that clarification. It wasn't aware, but thank you. That makes sense too.
Trustee Trejo.
I got to say that this is one piece that I really enjoyed discussing with some of the other trustees, because I think that I'm changing my mind, and I feel like I'm learning something as I've been discussing this more publicly with people. I think that there was one comment that might even be up there. The idea that maybe these fees get phased in over time. We're talking about what to do with our reserve fund, how to work with it. I think that you have a reserve fund. I love the discipline of having one for situations just like this, right? When you are in a bind and you have to figure out some creative ways to use funds, how we get that money out of there. I mean, I don't mind going under that reserve number if we accommodate through a loan or whatever. All these metrics that we could use, these financial instruments we could use, but it's for a rainy day and it's raining, right? Like, that's why we have these funds, and that's why we should replenish them when available. I think that if the fees issue, I do agree that we can't pay for all our sins all at once. That takes, fiscal management that is different than what we've been doing traditionally. And there's no reason why students or one individual group should take the burden of that whole thing. I think we all should, right? It shouldn't just be disproportionately hitting one group. So I appreciate the idea of evaluating creative ways to use our reserve funds and how we help to soften the blow of some of these very serious demands that we have on our own infrastructure here at the bar. And I think that we need to be healthy, and we need to be able to provide service that people can depend on and rely on. There is a customer service thing that I think we'd ultimately like to be holding ourselves to. And so I'm just sensitive to all your comments, and I appreciate that. And I think that I appreciate the conversations I've had with the trustees and just how to be creative with what we've got. So, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just say, and maybe Araceli would chime in, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't urge the board not to just put this entire item off. I think we've come many times here, and I don't think it would be prudent for us to not move on some of these fees. The significant concern seems to be around the CAL's fees, and I think, as Donna indicated, we did not put the tiered pricing option itself out for public comment previously. I think it makes sense to do that. I also think we can take direction from the board as to how to use a portion of the unanticipated additional revenue to offset those fees when we bring the proposal back to the board. So I would encourage or ask the board to consider moving forward on the rest of the fees, but holding that one aside and directing us to do more work on it. So that would be sort of what I'd say, and I don't know, Arcel, if you have anything you'd like to
Yeah,
chime
no,
in.
and I would just say, we're going to be working on our 2024 budget any day now, and, we do need to be able to budget where we think admissions is going to be, and without knowing whether the fees are going to be increased or not, that would be difficult to predict. Also, a reminder again that I said in the earlier slides, admissions has a good reserve, not just because of those $2 million that we got from additional student sitting, but also because we did transfer all of the reserves, right, from another fund for 2023. Without that, we'd be negative, right?
But I think we're right now, we're just looking at the accounts as they are, but it's super important. That's not that fund got bailed out too, which is why there's money in there, right? So it's totally duly noted for sure.
It's one time, that bailout money's one time, it's gone. Yeah.
All right, if no other comments, can I take the roll, please?
Buenaventura.
Aye.
Chen.
Aye.
Cisneros.
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Huser.
Aye.
Shelby. Oh, Trustee Shelby stepped down. Soel.
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
Trejo.
Aye.
Stallings.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
So if I could just give those updates, no need to put up the slides. We just wanted to follow up, actually starting where we just left off, Trustee Sewell, with the action that was taken by the Executive Committee on August the 10th. What we had proposed was a reduction in the number of locations, testing sites for the February 2024 exam. We presented 7 sites as the proposal. One of those sites being Ontario, none of those sites being San Diego. At the executive committee meeting, there was a strong request for us to reevaluate whether, in fact, there was the ability to replace the Ontario site with the San Diego site, with a site in San Diego. We originally picked the San Diego site because we were not aware of a San Diego site that would be able to accommodate the same numbers. So we went back following that direction of the executive committee. We Googled sites. We checked with every site that we had previously used or that's been on our list. We reached out to former trustee Knoll and asked him if he had suggestions. I reached out to deans of 4 law schools in the San Diego area, asked for suggestions, assistance, contacts that they may have. Ultimately, the site that I think would be able to accommodate the numbers was unavailable for February. And we had known that initially that site was unavailable. We looked at casinos, we looked at a variety of things. We could not find a site that would hold more than 500 to 700 people, and we were looking for a site for at least 1,500. So what the executive committee had directed was that we do that exploration, we present the results of that exploration to the board chair and the executive director, and they would decide at that point if we contract with Ontario or a site in San Diego. Following the presentation of all of that information to the executive director and the chair, they directed us to contract with the Ontario site. And so we do not have a San Diego site for for February. I actually have a call that was initiated by USD Law School next week to talk about sort of future options and how they might be able to help in finding some spaces. They were one of the schools I reached out to in July following in August following the executive committee meeting. And so they actually coordinated several schools on the call. And we're all going to sort of figure out if we can come up with something that would give us enough seats in San Diego for future. So that's February. For the July exam, what we are looking at, and the reason that we only took action with regard to this reduced sites in February and not for all of 2024, is that we are looking at the ability to make part of the exam remote in July 2024. Currently, we are not permitted to have the multiple choice or the MBE section remote. We conduct those in our test locations across the state, but we are looking at whether we can administer the exam remotely in a way that makes it equally accessible to all applicants. We are looking also at whether it would save us money if instead of the test sites if we can't go fully remote, if we can use established test centers that exist up and down the state that would have and frankly exist in other states and other countries that would allow people, they would still have to come to California to our test sites to take the multiple choice, but could then take the essay and the performance test at one of these test centers closer to their home or remotely. So we're exploring a number of options. We're talking to other states. We are talking to vendors of remote technology. We are talking to vendors of body-worn cameras. We are looking at everything that we can think of. We're talking to IHSS to see about using that work pool for in-home proctors, for people who have accommodations that don't lend themselves to being on camera the entire time. So we are exploring all of these different options. We will come back to you in November and give you an update on where we are, what information we have received, potential cost estimates or cost savings as a result. I expect that we won't be able to give you the final. We won't be able to complete all of the research and we're having a forum for those who need testing accommodations to also sort of get their ideas and explore those. So we won't be able to have everything nailed down 100% in November. So we expect it'll take us to the January meeting to come back with the final proposal and the final determination of whether we can go remote, use these test centers, or need to continue applying the approach that we did for the February 2024 exam with the reduced test sites. So you'll be hearing more from us at the next two board meetings on that.
All right, thank you.